Hello everyone, and welcome back to the channel. Today, we are going to explore one of the most well-known and unsettling stories in modern American history, the tale of the Amityville house in New York. This is not just a story born from imagination or written purely for entertainment. It is a story that began with a real tragedy, one that continues to spark fear, debate, and fascination even decades later. When most people hear the phrase haunted house, they tend to think of scary movies, made-up legends, or exaggerated ghost stories told around a campfire. But Amityville is different. It is rooted in real-life events that shook not only a family, but also an entire community. What happened inside this house in the mid-1970s left a permanent mark on both the town of Amityville and the cultural imagination of the world. In 1974, the DeFeo family lived at 112 Ocean Avenue, in what appeared to be a peaceful and well-kept home. Outwardly, they seemed like an ordinary family living the American dream. But that dream was shattered one night in November, when 6 members of the family were killed inside the house. Their eldest son, Ronald DeFeo Jr., was later convicted and sentenced. This shocking event instantly turned the house into a symbol of tragedy, and in the eyes of many, a place burdened with darkness. For a time, people thought the story would end there. The crime had been solved, justice had been handed down, and the neighborhood tried to return to normal. But just over a year later, the house once again made headlines, this time for reasons that went beyond the physical world. In December 1975, the Lutz family, George and Kathy Lutz, and their 3 children, moved into the house, hoping for a fresh start. At first, everything seemed fine, but very quickly, strange occurrences began to unfold. They described unusual noises echoing through the house at night, doors and windows opening or closing on their own, and foul odors spreading through rooms with no clear source. On several occasions, they claimed to have seen shadows or figures moving in the darkness, as if someone or something was still living there alongside them. The tension inside the house grew worse each day. George, who was usually calm and steady, reportedly became irritable and obsessed, often waking up at the same time every night without reason. Kathy described moments where she felt a heavy presence in the rooms, as though unseen eyes were watching. Their children also behaved differently, with their youngest claiming to have made a new friend that no one else could see. After only 28 days, the Lutz family fled the house in the middle of the night, leaving most of their possessions behind. They later explained that the fear and constant disturbances had become unbearable, and that they simply could not remain there any longer. Their story gained massive media attention. Some people saw it as undeniable proof of paranormal activity, while others were skeptical and suggested it was either exaggeration or a way to gain publicity. Yet, whether true or not, the Amityville house became a legend. The Lutz family's account was turned into the book The Amityville Horror in 1977, which became a bestseller and later inspired a series of horror films. From that point forward, Amityville was no longer just a quiet neighborhood in New York. The name itself became synonymous with fear and mystery, a reminder of how tragedy and belief in the supernatural can intertwine to create one of the most unforgettable stories in modern history. In this video, we will revisit what truly happened with the DeFeo family, dive deeper into the Lutz family's terrifying 28-day experience, and explore why Amityville still stands today as one of the most infamous houses in the world. But before we begin, do not forget to click like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell, so you won't miss future stories full of mystery, suspense, and intrigue. Now, let us step inside the chilling legend of the Amityville house. To truly understand why the house at 112 Ocean Avenue in Amityville has become one of the most infamous locations in American history, we need to go back to the year 1974, when a crime shook not just a community, but the entire country. What happened within those walls was not a ghost story at first, it was a real and devastating tragedy. The DeFeo family lived in what appeared to be a comfortable, prosperous home. To neighbors and outsiders, they seemed like a typical large family, parents Ronald and Louise DeFeo, and their 6 children. On the surface, they fit the image of middle-class stability. Yet, behind the facade of a well-kept home and polite smiles, tension and conflict simmered. The eldest son, Ronald Butch DeFeo Jr., had long struggled with personal issues. Reports later revealed that he clashed frequently with his father, felt stifled by strict household rules, and had fallen into patterns of erratic behavior. Accounts also suggest that he had experimented with substances, further straining relationships within the family. These unresolved conflicts and his increasingly unstable state of mind created an environment where something tragic seemed inevitable, even if no one could have imagined the scale of what folly was to come. On the night of November 13, 1974, that underlying tension erupted into horror. While the rest of the family slept in their beds, Butch armed himself with a rifle and moved from room to room. One by one he shot his parents and 4 of his siblings. The most disturbing detail is that all 6 victims were later found lying face down in their beds, with no clear signs of a struggle or attempts to escape. This mystery has baffled experts for decades. How could 6 people be killed in separate rooms without anyone waking or trying to resist? After committing the crime, Butch attempted to stage a facade of innocence. He ran to a nearby bar and claimed in a panic that his family had been killed by someone else. But investigators quickly pieced together the evidence. Within hours, suspicion turned toward him, and soon he confessed. The trial that followed added new layers of darkness to the case. In court, Butch gave conflicting accounts of what had happened. At times, he claimed that voices in his head urged him to commit the killings. Other times, he shifted blame or denied responsibility. His defense attorneys argued for insanity, pointing to his unstable mental state and alleged hallucinations. However, prosecutors maintained that his actions were deliberate and cold-blooded. Ultimately, the jury found him guilty of 6 counts of second-degree murder. He was sentenced to 6 consecutive life sentences, ensuring he would spend the rest of his days behind bars. Yet, even with a conviction, the case left behind haunting questions. Why had all the victims remained in their beds? Why were there no signs of struggle, no neighbors awakened by multiple gunshots? These unanswered mysteries left room for speculation that something beyond the ordinary might have influenced that night. For believers in the supernatural, this fueled the idea that the house itself was cursed or tainted by dark forces. For skeptics, it was simply evidence of psychological breakdown and tragic family dysfunction. The aftermath of the murders was just as chilling. The once proud home of the DeFeo family now stood as a grim reminder of violence. Neighbors reported feeling uneasy whenever they passed by. Whispers of a curse spread, and soon the property was shrouded in an aura of dread. For many in the community, it was no longer just a house, it had become a landmark of fear. This was the context in which the Lutz family would later enter the story. To them, it was an opportunity, a spacious home at a reduced price, a chance to build a new life. But the lingering shadow of the DeFeo murders set the stage for what they later described as their terrifying 28-day ordeal. Whether or not the supernatural truly played a role, the crime itself created an atmosphere heavy with trauma and fear, and that atmosphere would soon capture the world's attention. Looking back, the DeFeo case is remembered not only for the brutality of the act, but also for its role as the foundation of the Amityville legend. Without that night in November 1974, there would be no best-selling book, no blockbuster films, no decades-long debates about haunted houses and curses. It was the human tragedy, the destruction of a family by one of its own, that gave rise to everything that followed. Even today, Scholars, journalists and paranormal investigators revisit the DeFeo murders, each seeking their own answers. Was Butch driven solely by inner demons of the psychological kind, or was there something darker, lurking in the shadows of the Amityville house? The lack of definitive explanation is precisely what has kept the story alive. In conclusion, the DeFeo tragedy remains a chilling chapter in American history. It is a reminder that sometimes, the scariest stories do not come from ghosts or spirits, but from the human capacity for violence. And yet, because of the mysteries left unresolved, the killings also open the door for speculation that the house itself carried an unnatural weight. This is where the story takes a dramatic turn. In the aftermath of the DeFeo murders, the house might have been left alone, abandoned as a monument to sorrow. Instead, it became the stage for the next chapter of the Amityville saga, the 28 days of fear experienced by the Lutz family. That chapter, whether you believe it to be fact or fiction, would turn a true crime into one of the most enduring legends of the supernatural in modern times. After the trial of Ronald DeFeo Jr. and the conviction that followed, many believed the Amityville house would remain only a tragic crime scene, a place remembered for its violent past but eventually forgotten. However, history had other plans. Just over a year after the DeFeo murders, a new family moved into 112 Ocean Avenue, and what they claimed to experience in the following weeks would forever cement the house's reputation as one of the most infamous haunted homes in the world. In December 1975, George and Kathy Lutz, along with Kathy's 3 children from a previous marriage, purchased the Amityville house. The deal seemed too good to pass up, a spacious 3-story home with a pool and a Flies-San boathouse, all for a fraction of its real market value. The reason for the bargain was well known: the DeFeo murders, but the Lutz family, while aware of the tragedy, believed they could build a new life there. At first, the house seemed like a dream come true. But almost immediately, unsettling experiences began to unfold. From the very first night, the atmosphere in the house felt heavy. Kathy later described it as though the air itself carried a weight, pressing down on her. George dismissed these feelings at first, believing they were simply psychological, the power of suggestion, after knowing the history of the home. Yet, within days, things escalated beyond what they could rationalize. Unexplained noises became a nightly occurrence. George recalled hearing loud bangs, footsteps echoing across the upstairs hall, and the sound of doors slamming even when everyone was in bed. Sometimes, faint voices or whispers seemed to drift through the rooms, though no source could ever be identified. The disturbances left George restless. He began waking at exactly 3:15 a.m. each night, the same time the DeFeo murders had taken place. He would get out of bed, often walking the house in silence, checking locks and windows, always with the unsettling feeling that someone unseen was watching. As nights passed, the disturbances grew stranger. Unpleasant odors like rotting garbage or sewage would suddenly fill the air in certain rooms, only to vanish moments later. No plumbing or structural issues could account for it. Black slime-like liquid appeared on walls and floors, seeping from nowhere. Doors and windows opened by themselves, even after being firmly locked. The family described these occurrences as relentless, with no clear pattern. Most disturbing of all were the apparitions. Kathy reported seeing a shadowy female figure in her daughter's room. George once glanced out of an upstairs window and swore he saw glowing red eyes staring back at him from the darkness. On another occasion, he described seeing what looked like the outline of a pig-like creature lurking in the yard, its eyes burning bright. The children also began showing troubling signs. Kathy's youngest daughter claimed to have made a new friend named Jody, a being she described as large and with animal-like features. At first, the family brushed it off as childish imagination, but after multiple incidents where they too claimed to sense or glimpse something unusual in her room, the atmosphere became even more frightening. Meanwhile, George himself seemed to change. Normally a level-headed man, he grew increasingly irritable, moody, and detached. He obsessed over the fireplace, spending long hours staring into the calm flames, almost as though hypnotized. He also became consumed with chopping wood and keeping the house warm, despite the heating system functioning normally. Kathy worried he was no longer the same person she had married, as though the house itself was influencing his behavior. Out of desperation, the family invited a priest to bless the home. According to their account, as soon as the priest began the blessing ritual, he heard a voice hiss the words, "Get out!" He reportedly felt a sharp slap across his face from an unseen force and left, shaken. Later, he warned the family not to spend another night there. But the Lutz family tried to endure. For weeks, they battled what they described as escalating chaos, doors ripped from hinges, swarms of flies appearing out of season, and the constant sense of being surrounded by unseen forces. Kathy began having nightmares that replayed the DeFeo murders in disturbing detail. George found himself increasingly disconnected from reality, losing track of time and neglecting his business. The children became withdrawn and fearful, with one of them waking in tears nearly every night. The breaking point came in January 1976. On that final night, the family later described a storm of activity that terrified them beyond reason. They reported hearing deafening noises, furniture moving on its own, and seeing dark figures stalking the halls. Beds shook violently, and the children screamed as if invisible hands were pulling at them. George and Kathy felt they were in immediate danger. In the middle of the night, they grabbed their children and fled, leaving behind clothes, furniture, and nearly all of their belongings. They never returned. The Lutz family lived in the Amityville house for only 28 days. But the story of their ordeal quickly spread. Soon after, they worked with author J. Anson to publish the Amityville Horror 1977, which became a worldwide bestseller. The book presented their account as fact, describing the nightmarish experiences in detail. Readers were captivated, and the story gained massive publicity, setting the stage for the 1979 film adaptation and many sequels that followed. Skeptics questioned their motives, pointing out that the book and film brought financial gain and fame. Critics argued that stress, suggestibility, and the house's dark history influenced the Lutz family's perceptions, exaggerating ordinary events into paranormal experiences, but believers pointed to the consistency of their accounts and the lingering sense of dread surrounding the house as evidence that something truly supernatural had occurred. Regardless of where the truth lies, the Lutz family's 28 days transformed the Amityville story from a tragic crime into a full-fledged legend. Their claims remain some of the most debated paranormal accounts of all time. For some, it is proof that evil can linger long after tragedy. For others, it is a cautionary tale of how fear, belief, and suggestion can shape human experience. What is undeniable is the impact their story had on popular culture. Without those 28 days, Amityville might have been remembered as just another true crime. Instead, it became the inspiration for books, movies, documentaries, and endless debate, ensuring its place in the annals of modern folklore. After the Lutz family fled their home in January 1976, the Amityville case quickly evolved from a private nightmare into a public phenomenon. What might have remained only a local story tied to home, tragedy, and whispers of the paranormal instead exploded into one of the most influential and long-lasting legends in modern horror culture. Books, movies, television programs, and endless debates carried the Amityville story far beyond New York, embedding it into the collective imagination of audiences worldwide. The first and perhaps most important step in this transformation came in 1977, with the release of J. Anson's book, The Amityville Horror. Based on interviews with the Lutz family, the book recounted their 28 days of terror, with vivid, cinematic detail. It described George waking at 3:15 a.m. each night, the strange smells and black liquid, the chilling apparitions, and the night they fled in fear. Though presented as non-fiction, the book read like a thriller, and it captivated audiences who were eager to believe. It became a massive bestseller, selling millions of copies around the world. The book's success quickly caught the attention of Hollywood. In 1979, the first film adaptation, The Amityville Horror, was released. It was a box office hit, one of the highest-grossing independent films of its time, and it cemented the Amityville house as an icon of horror. With its distinctive eye-like windows glowing ominously at night, the house became as recognizable as Dracula's castle or the Bates Motel. The film's imagery, the flies swarming on a crucifix, the doors slamming shut, the sinister voices burned itself into the memory of a generation of horror fans. From there, the Amityville franchise grew. Numerous sequels and spin-offs followed, some loosely connected to the original events, others purely fictional. A 2005 remake reintroduced the story to a new audience, updating the scares with modern effects, but keeping the essence of the legend alive. Over the decades, more than a dozen films carrying the Amityville name have been produced, ranging from serious horror to campy interpretations. This flood of adaptations kept the story in circulation and ensured its survival as a horror staple. Television also played a huge role in sustaining Amityville's cultural relevance. Countless documentaries, investigative specials, and paranormal programs featured the house. Teams of ghost hunters, psychics, and journalists repeatedly visited the site, hoping to capture evidence or debunk the myths. While definitive proof was never produced, each program contributed to the mystique, keeping audiences debating and wondering whether the haunting was real. Amityville became a case study in nearly every series that explored supernatural events. The story's reach extended far beyond the United States. International audiences consumed the book and films, and Amityville was translated into multiple languages. The tale inspired horror writers, filmmakers, and artists around the world. References to Amityville appear in music, novels, and even video games, with its reputation as the quintessential haunted house making it a universal symbol of fear. Even people who have never read the book or seen the films often recognize the name Amityville and associate it with paranormal dread. Part of its lasting impact comes from how Amityville helped define a new trend in horror: stories based on true events. Before Amityville, many haunted house tales were treated as purely fictional. But the marketing of the Amityville Horror as a true story blurred the line between fact and fiction. This created a powerful effect. Viewers and readers felt the events could really happen. The success of Amityville paved the way for later franchises like The Conjuring, which similarly drew on real cases to heighten fear. In this way, Amityville did not just capture an audience, it reshaped the genre. At the same time, Amityville became a lightning rod for controversy and skepticism. Journalists, skeptics, and even some people close to the case accused the Lutz family and Jay Anson of fabricating or embellishing the story for profit. Critics pointed out inconsistencies in the accounts, the speed with which the book deal was made, and the financial success that followed. Lawsuits were even filed between parties involved in the book's creation, further fueling suspicion. And yet, even these controversies only added to the legend. The more people argued about whether it was true or false, the more attention the story received. Despite or perhaps because of these doubts, Amityville's place in culture solidified. The combination of true crime and supernatural horror proved irresistible. The DeFeo murders provided a factual backbone, while the Lutz haunting supplied the terrifying spectacle. Together, they created a narrative that satisfied both horror fans and true crime enthusiasts. This blending of genres became a blueprint for future stories that blurred reality and fiction. Even the real house itself became a symbol. Although it has been remodeled and its address changed to discourage curious visitors, it remains a destination for horror fans. People still drive by to take photos, or simply to say they have seen the most famous haunted house in America. Its very existence continues to feed the myth, reminding us that behind the stories, there is a physical place where real tragedy occurred. Ultimately, the cultural impact of Amityville lies not just in the scares, but in the way it reveals something about us. The story shows our fascination with the unknown, our need to believe in forces beyond explanation, and our attraction to places where real history collides with imagined terror. Amityville became more than a haunting. It became a mirror for society's fears and obsessions. Today, nearly 5 decades later, Amityville endures. The films may vary in quality, the book may be questioned, but the legend remains strong. Amityville has become shorthand for haunted houses everywhere, a term that instantly evokes dread. Its influence can be seen in every based on a true story horror film, every paranormal investigation show, and every retelling of ghostly encounters. In short, Amityville did more than scare, it shaped modern horror culture. It proved that when true tragedy and supernatural storytelling combine, the result can be a legend that refuses to die. From the moment the Lutz family's story entered the public sphere, Amityville became more than just a chilling tale. It became a battleground between belief and doubt. For some, the experiences of George and Kathy Lutz and their children were undeniable proof of the paranormal. For others, they were nothing more than exaggerations, half-truths, or outright fabrications crafted for profit. This tension has fueled the Amityville legend for decades, ensuring its survival through constant debate. One of the first sources of controversy was the credibility of the Lutz family's account. When they abandoned the house in January 1976 and spoke of the horrors they endured, investigators, journalists and skeptics began digging into their story. Many found inconsistencies. For example, some of the phenomena described, like the black slime seeping from the walls or doors violently ripped from hinges, were not corroborated by neighbors, later owners, or inspectors. Even when the home was resold, no structural damage or strange substances were reported. These discrepancies led critics to suspect embellishment. Skeptics also highlighted the timing of events. Within months of fleeing, the Lutz family had connected with author Jay Anson to create the Amityville Horror. The book became a bestseller and was quickly optioned for a film, bringing financial success. To some, this looked less like the aftermath of trauma and more like a carefully orchestrated media plan. Lawsuits between various parties, including disputes over royalties and claims of creative invention, only added to suspicions that profit was a driving motive. Despite these doubts, defenders of the Lutz family maintained that their fear was genuine. They argued that trauma could easily distort memory, and that the lack of physical evidence did not necessarily disprove psychological or spiritual experiences. Paranormal researchers sympathetic to the Lutzes pointed to the consistency of their accounts across interviews, suggesting that even if some details were exaggerated, the core of their story reflected real terror. Another point of contention centers on the trial of Ronald DeFeo Jr., whose 1974 crimes gave the house its dark reputation. During his defense, DeFeo claimed that voices compelled him to kill his family. While many believe this was a legal strategy to support an insanity plea, others view it as the first sign of a malevolent force tied to the house. Skeptics counter that DeFeo had a history of substance abuse and mental instability, making his claims unreliable. The ambiguity around his motives created fertile ground for speculation. Was he simply a troubled young man? Or was he influenced by something darker? The scientific community has generally dismissed the Amityville haunting. Psychologists point to stress, suggestibility, and the power of expectation as explanations for the Lutzes. experiences. Knowing the gruesome history of the house could have heightened their anxiety, leading them to interpret ordinary noises or events as supernatural. Sociologists, meanwhile, highlight how cultural context in the 1970s, an era of fascination with the occult and rising interest in paranormal topics, made the story especially resonant. From The Exorcist 1973 to widespread media coverage of psychic phenomena, the environment was ripe for Amityville to capture the public imagination. Journalists who investigated the case uncovered additional contradictions. For example, the infamous story of the priest who allegedly heard a voice commanding him to get out has been challenged. Some reports suggest the priest later downplayed or retracted parts of his account, though interpretations vary. Other alleged witnesses gave conflicting statements, further blurring the line between truth and myth. At the same time, paranormal investigators have repeatedly returned to Amityville. Some claim to have recorded unusual sounds, cold spots or orbs in photographs. Others report nothing abnormal. This lack of consistent evidence has allowed both sides to continue arguing indefinitely. Believers see the absence of proof as part of the mystery, while skeptics cite it as evidence that nothing paranormal exists there at all. The role of media and marketing also cannot be ignored. The book was marketed heavily as a true story, and the 1979 film reinforced the idea that audiences were witnessing real events. This blending of fact and fiction blurred boundaries, making it difficult for the public to separate reality from storytelling. Critics argue that sensationalism inflated the story beyond recognition, while supporters claim that the fear it inspired proves its authenticity. Interestingly, subsequent owners of the Amityville house have reported no unusual activity. Several families have lived there peacefully, even as tourists and thrill-seekers continued to visit. This fact is often cited by skeptics as the strongest evidence against the Lutz's claims. Yet believers argue that paranormal phenomena can be selective, affecting only certain individuals or manifesting only under particular conditions. The lack of ongoing activity, then, does not necessarily negate the Lutz family's experiences. The controversies surrounding Amityville extend beyond the haunting itself into legal and ethical questions. Did the Lutz family exploit a tragedy for personal gain? Did publishers and filmmakers manipulate the story for profit, regardless of the truth, or was it a sincere attempt to share an unexplainable experience? These questions have never been fully answered, but they underscore the blurred lines between commerce, entertainment, and belief. What makes the Amityville case so enduring is precisely this uncertainty. If it had been conclusively proven a hoax, the story might have faded. If it had been definitively verified as genuine paranormal activity, it might have been resolved. Instead, it exists in the gray area, half believed and half doubted, continually reignited by new films, documentaries and debates. Every re-examination reopens the questions. What really happened in those 28 days? And why did 6 people die so strangely in that house just a year earlier? Ultimately, Amityville is less about whether ghosts truly exist, and more about the power of belief and skepticism. It demonstrates how stories gain strength from controversy, how human psychology can amplify fear, and how unresolved mysteries capture the imagination far more effectively than neat answers. The Amityville haunting thrives because it straddles the line between truth and fiction, between nightmare and reality. Even now, more than 4 decades later, the name Amityville evokes immediate recognition. For some, it is shorthand for the supernatural. For others, it is a case study in mass hysteria and commercial exploitation. The fact that it can be both simultaneously inspiring fear and doubt is what has made it one of the most iconic and hotly debated legends in modern history. Nearly 5 decades have passed since the events that first put 112 Ocean Avenue on the map, yet the Amityville story continues to thrive. It has endured long after the DeFeo trial ended, long after the Lutz family left, and long after critics dismissed parts of the tale as fabrication. The reason is simple. Amityville is no longer just a house or even a haunting. It has become a legend, a cultural touchstone that reflects society's fears, fascinations, and need to wrestle with the unknown. Its legacy lies in the way it fuses reality and myth, true crime and supernatural speculation, skepticism and belief. At its core, Amityville resonates because it was built on a foundation of verifiable tragedy. The DeFeo murders of 1974 were real. 6 people lost their lives at the hands of a son and brother. This brutal fact gives the Amityville haunting a gravity that purely fictional stories lack. Readers and viewers could not simply dismiss the house as a set piece. It was the scene of an actual crime. The horror was not abstract. It had names, faces, and court records. This anchoring in reality allowed the later stories of hauntings to feel more plausible, even if they were debated. The second reason for Amityville's lasting power is the role of media amplification. Jay Anson's book, written in a gripping narrative style, was marketed as a true account and became a bestseller. Hollywood followed swiftly, and the 1979 film adaptation imprinted the Amityville house onto the global imagination. The eyes of the house's windows became instantly iconic, symbolizing menace and dread. Once something enters the realm of pop culture in such a vivid way, it rarely disappears. Each new sequel, remake, or documentary has kept the legend alive, ensuring that Amityville is passed on to new generations. Another layer of the story's endurance comes from its ambiguity. If the Lutz haunting had been conclusively debunked, the story might have died. If it had been scientifically validated beyond doubt, it might have lost its mystery. But because the truth remains murky, half believed, half questioned, the debate itself sustains interest. People are drawn to unresolved mysteries, and Amityville sits squarely in that space. It is not fully hoax, not fully truth, but something in between. That uncertainty is its fuel. Amityville also reflects broader cultural anxieties. In the 1970s, the United States was grappling with political scandals, economic struggles, and disillusionment after the Vietnam War. Society was fascinated by the occult, with films like The Exorcist and Rosemary's Baby dominating popular culture. Against this backdrop, Amityville struck a chord. The story symbolized the idea that evil could invade the most sacred of spaces, the family home. A house, normally a place of safety, became a place of dread. This inversion of comfort into danger resonated deeply, and continues to resonate in today's world, where people still fear hidden threats within ordinary life. The legacy of Amityville is also evident in the horror genre it helped shape. Before Amityville, haunted house tales were largely seen as gothic fiction. After Amityville, they became a staple of modern horror, especially when marketed as based on a true story. Films like The Conjuring and Paranormal Activity owe part of their success to the path paved by Amityville, which showed that audiences crave stories where the ordinary collides with the extraordinary. The phrase "inspired by real events" became a powerful marketing tool because of the precedent Amityville set. Moreover, the house itself became a pilgrimage site. Though remodeled and its address changed to deter tourists, people still drive by to glimpse the most haunted house in America. It continues to be photographed, documented, and discussed. The physical structure is a reminder that this is not just a story, but a real location tied to real lives. Its very presence reinforces the legend, anchoring it in the material world. The Amityville legacy also lies in the way it highlights the power of storytelling. Even if parts of the Lutz narrative were embellished, their account struck such a nerve that it grew beyond their control. Once released into the world, the story took on a life of its own, reshaped by books, films, and debates. This shows how narratives can transcend fact or fiction. They can become symbols. Amityville symbolizes fear itself, the fear of unseen forces, the fear of family destruction, the fear that even our safe spaces are vulnerable. Critically, Amityville also teaches us about the interplay between belief and skepticism. Believers find validation in the chilling accounts, seeing them as proof of a spiritual dimension. Skeptics use the inconsistencies as evidence of human imagination, psychology, and the lure of money. Both perspectives keep the legend alive, because each side continues to argue and revisit the evidence. In this way, Amityville does not need an answer to survive. The debate is its lifeblood. Even today, Amityville continues to inspire. Authors revisit it in new books. Filmmakers reimagine it in sequels and spin-offs. Paranormal investigators include it in their lists of most haunted places. Pop culture references it in songs, television shows, and even comedy sketches. The mere word Amityville conjures an image of fear, whether or not someone knows the details of the case. That linguistic shorthand where a single word communicates dread is itself a remarkable legacy. Finally, the story endures because it taps into something universal, the enduring appeal of mystery. Human beings are storytellers by nature, and we are drawn to the unknown. Amityville offers the perfect mixture of reality and enigma. A crime that truly happened, a haunting that may or may not have, and a cultural machine that turned both into legend. It does not matter whether you believe or not. What matters is that the story continues to spark curiosity, fear, and fascination. In the end, the legacy of Amityville is not simply about a house in New York. It is about the way people respond to fear, the way stories spread, and the way myths are created. It stands as a reminder that some stories live on, not because they are proven, but because they refuse to be silenced. As long as people continue to ask what really happened in Amityville, the legend will never die. As we reach the end of the Amityville saga, it becomes clear that this is more than a ghost story. It is a tale where fact and fiction blur, where human tragedy collides with imagination, and where belief and skepticism coexist in perpetual tension. The Amityville story, beginning with the DeFeo murders, followed by the Lutz family's alleged haunting, and sustained by decades of books, films, and debates, offers us not only fear, but also insight into the human condition. The first and perhaps most profound lesson of Amityville is about the fragility of home. A house is supposed to represent safety, family, and shelter from the world. Yet in Amityville, the home became the stage for horror. In 1974, it was the site of familial destruction. In 1975, it became, according to the Lutz family, a place of terror. The story reflects a universal anxiety, that even the spaces we trust most can harbor danger. The Amityville house forces us to confront the uncomfortable possibility that safety is never absolute. Second, the Amityville story reveals the power of belief and imagination. Whether or not the Lutzes experienced real paranormal events, their testimony sparked an enduring legend. Human minds are deeply influenced by context and suggestion. Knowing the violent history of the home may have heightened their fears, leading them to interpret ordinary creaks, drafts, or shadows as supernatural threats. Yet even if psychological, those experiences were real to them, and real enough to ignite a cultural phenomenon. Amityville shows how belief can shape perception, and how storytelling can magnify private fears into shared myths. The third lesson lies in the power of media. Without Jay Anson's best-selling book and the 1979 film adaptation, Amityville might have faded into obscurity as just another crime scene. But the book was written in a gripping cinematic style, and the film gave visual form to the terror. Marketing emphasized that the events were true, blurring the line between fact and fiction. This combination transformed Amityville into a brand, one that survives to this day. The story demonstrates how media can amplify, distort, and immortalize an event, turning it into something far larger than reality alone. Fourth, Amityville teaches us about the dynamic between belief and skepticism. For every believer who cites the Lutz experiences as proof of the supernatural, there is a skeptic who dismisses them as a hoax. This debate is not a flaw, it is the very reason the story endures. A mystery conclusively solved loses its allure, but one that sits on the boundary between explanation and enigma remains endlessly fascinating. Amityville thrives because it was never resolved. It exists in a space where both believers and skeptics can find material to support their views. There is also a lesson here about the commodification of fear. From the book to the films to the countless documentaries, Amityville has generated immense profit. Some critics argue that this exploitation cheapens real tragedy, particularly the DeFeo murders. Others contend that stories, once told, take on lives of their own, and that the retelling of fear is part of how societies process trauma. Regardless, Amityville reminds us that fear can be marketed, packaged and consumed just like any other product. Yet despite these criticisms, the story also carries value. It has become a cautionary tale, a reminder of how quickly narratives can grow, how powerfully they can shape perception, and how enduring they can become. It also highlights the way communities and individuals grapple with unexplainable events, sometimes by rationalizing them, sometimes by mythologizing them. Amityville has become both a warning and a mirror, reflecting not only our fears of the supernatural, but also our fascination with storytelling itself. The broader cultural impact of Amityville cannot be overstated. It shaped the horror genre by popularizing the based-on-true events format, influencing films from The Conjuring to Paranormal Activity. It gave us one of the most recognizable icons of haunted houses in the world, the gabled windows that look like ominous eyes. It also became a case study for psychologists, sociologists, and paranormal researchers alike. Whether treated as myth, case study, or entertainment, Amityville holds a place in classrooms, documentaries, and late-night conversations. In reflecting on its legacy, we might ask, why does this story still matter? The answer lies in its universality. Amityville is not just about one house in New York. It is about the human experience of fear, the thin line between reality and imagination, and the stories we tell to make sense of the unknown. It is about the fact that we are drawn to darkness, even as it frightens us. We are compelled to look into the shadows, to wonder what lurks there, and to pass those stories on. Amityville embodies this paradox, repelling us and attracting us at the same time. Ultimately, the greatest lesson of Amityville is that fear is a story we tell ourselves. Whether ghosts existed in that house or not, the legend has power, because people believe in it, discuss it, and retell it. Fear lives not only in places but in minds. Amityville reminds us that storytelling can keep fear alive for generations, even when physical evidence is absent. It is not the house itself that is haunted. It is our imagination. Today, the house still stands, remodeled and readdressed, but it remains the most famous haunted house in America. Families have lived there peacefully, yet the legend persists. It is a testament to the power of narrative. Once a story captures the imagination, it can never truly be silenced. The Amityville story endures not because it was proven true, but because it speaks to something timeless, our need to confront the possibility that the unknown may be closer than we think. And so, as we close this journey, we see Amityville for what it truly is, a legend born of tragedy, fueled by belief, sustained by controversy, and immortalized by culture. It is both a warning and a fascination, both fact and fiction, both human and otherworldly. Its greatest lesson is not about whether ghosts exist, but about how stories themselves can become immortal. Thank you for following this story to the very end. If you enjoyed this deep dive into one of the world's most famous mysteries, do not forget to hit like, subscribe, and turn on notifications. More stories of history, mystery, and the unknown are on their way. Until next time, remember, the line between reality and legend is thinner than we think.